Podcast here on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. You can follow me on Twitter at Schixomania. You can follow me on Instagram at SchizoForever and subscribe right here on YouTube at Schixo. So, today's topic, this is the first official episode of the Schixo Podcast. Last episode that I uploaded was more of just a test run. I was just trying to get my feet up under me. And now I am going to actually introduce the first official episode into the Schixo Podcast. So today, what I wanted to talk to you guys about is why did I start a podcast? What is the purpose of this podcast? And what are we going to accomplish here on the Schixo Podcast? Well, I always wanted to be a radio personality, so I dabbled in it a little bit while I was in college at Prince George's Community College, Largo, Maryland. I dabbled in it a bit. I was on a radio show with my boy Dorian Womble. It was a bit of an amateur show though, so it wasn't really anything too professional that I got a lot of experience from. But it was nice to see how my voice sounded on the radio, so I could get used to that. But fast forward to about 6 years later, and I'm on a podcast with a close friend of mine, Christian Tejeda, on the Mountain Loft podcast, which you should definitely go check out. Spirit Moose on YouTube. You should definitely go check out those podcasts. I had the opportunity to go on there twice and to speak with him about different topics and really see how a podcast works, see what the vibe around the podcast should feel like, what it should be. And I definitely feel like I took a lot away from that as well. And, you know, I was sitting around in my house. You know, I have a newborn baby. So me and my wife and my newborn, we're just sitting around the house. And I start getting really frustrated. And I'm like, you know, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, my YouTube's not taking off. You know, things just aren't seeming to work out the way that I envisioned them. And she told me, you know, let's sit down, let's meditate for a little bit, let's figure things out. Let's just take a deep breath, get some stress off of our shoulders, and figure this out together. So we do that. And the moment that we did that, I started to get to work. I started to look for my different avenues of creativity and things like that. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, I wanted to start a podcast. I remember. So I go upstairs and I start digging through our studio because my wife, she makes music. She's taking a break from it, but we still had all the equipment. We still had this microphone. We still had like the lights, the setup, and all that stuff. And what I realized was that I already had everything that I needed to start a podcast. And I was like, well, okay, this is surprising. I didn't realize that I had all this stuff already. I already had an interface for the mics. I already had a high quality studio mic. I already had the creative ideas in my head. I already had the lights. I already had the Mac desktop. I have all this stuff already, and I didn't realize it was right under my nose. And I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm starting it now. So I did a lot of research. I tried to figure out how to upload it to Spotify, what I needed for that, all the RSS feed links and things like that you need when you're doing a podcast. And after I got all that stuff together, I just started working. So I was working from about probably 2 p.m. to about 11, 12 o'clock at night, just straight working on this podcast, just grinding like I like to do when I'm feeling motivated. And it was definitely something that I found easy to do. And I think that that's a sign that this is something that I'm supposed to do because of how easily accessible everything was for me. I don't like to look at things as coincidences. I don't really believe in coincidences that much. But I definitely feel like if something that you love to do is easily accessible to you, then there's a reason why it's easily accessible to you. It's because that's what you're meant to be doing. So obviously, this is something that I'm meant to be doing, and it's something that I'm going to continue to do. I have guests lined up already. I think I've got about 3 or 4 interviews already set up and ready to go. And I can't wait to share those with you guys. Um, but speaking of that, the topics for those interviews, what am I hoping to accomplish with this podcast? Well, I really think it's important that we really start talking about the real things that go on in society, and I'm not just talking about the obvious like politics and things like that, which I tend to stay away from. But I'm talking more things about like mental health and how we as a society need to do better to acknowledge it and deal with it, or just being in an interracial relationship and how that's changed lives, or how making certain decisions like starting families and things like that, how that completely changes your life in a positive or a negative way, depending on who I'm talking to. Just the things that people aren't necessarily comfortable talking about all the time are the things that I want to attack on this podcast, and that is the plan. So, um, I left a comment, not a comment, I left a status on my Facebook page, um, asking for recommendations on what topics, what hard, serious topics do people want to hear about. And I think it's really important that people give me their feedback so that I know what exactly it is that they want to talk about, because there's a lot of things that need to be talked about that aren't being talked about because people are too scared, people are too sensitive to talk about these things. And I don't want there to be any filter with this podcast. I want to dive deep into the issues. I want real honesty, um, real transparency, all that good stuff. I need all that on this podcast. Um, so obviously there will be certain days for certain things. That's not the only thing that I'm going to be talking about on this podcast. I don't want to just simply talk about like social issues and things like that. I also want to bring a lighthearted feel to this podcast as well. So there'll be days for sports. There'll be days for wrestling because I am a wrestling fan. Um, and I think those days are important, but those days are their own days. I haven't gotten the schedule 100% um, mended and ironed out yet, but when I do, it will be a pretty consistent schedule of uploads where people can go ahead and check in and hear everything that they want to hear for the week. Of course, like I said, one day of a week will be dedicated to the serious real talk issues. Another day of the week could be dedicated to sports talk, wrestling talk, um, and other days of the week could be just dedicated to something else, like stuff that I found interesting that I want to talk about for 30 minutes, things like that. And my hope is that uh, this podcast allows people to have those serious conversations, but also feel like that this is a place that they can come to avoid the stresses of the world just for a little bit on certain days. So um, podcasting is, I wouldn't say it's easy, but I would say it's the easiest thing that I've been able to just jump right into. My wife always tells me I have a nice radio voice. People have always told me I have a nice radio voice. I have experience in basketball play-by-play commentary. I have experience in radio, like I said earlier, a little bit of experience there. But I always wanted to do my own thing where I have complete creative control over it, and this is my opportunity to do that. So my hope is that I just wish that people find this to be as interesting and as helpful as I'm trying to make it for them. Um, but at the end of the day, you can't really please everybody. I know that there's going to be some topics that rub people the wrong way, or some opinions that rub people the wrong way. Um, I just want to make clear my objective is not to offend anyone with my opinions or my takes on things. Uh, my my mission is to just get some different opinions out there, get the honest, transparent truth out there, and have these real discussions about things that need to be talked about. I'm not going to dive too far into every topic that I have lined up, but I do have quite a few of them lined up for future episodes. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Not every episode will be this short, I promise you. My episodes will be anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour. But this is just an introductory episode, just like yesterday sort of was. Yesterday was more of a test run, just trying to figure out how to put my podcast onto Spotify and things like that. But you could disregard yesterday's podcast. Obviously, it wasn't even edited. I had my baby in the background. I had a TV going in the background and all that stuff. It was just a practice one. This one is the real deal. This one is the official. This one is the first episode of the Schixo podcast. And I hope that this is the beginning of something very, very special, something very, very great. So until next time, like, share, subscribe right here on YouTube. Follow me on Spotify. Follow me on iTunes. Follow me on Twitter at Schixomania. And follow me on Instagram at Schixo Forever for more great content, for more great talk, for more great interviews, for just some real transparent conversations. Make sure you keep it locked on the Schixo podcast. And I'll see you guys soon. Peace.